Hello and welcome, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome back to Ne0 Gets To Know. We have got a new overlay, a new everything set up here, and of course, I've got a new interview for the first time in a long time. I've kind of had these ones on the back burner, but I thought I'd lean more now into Valorant. So I've got Ozzy with me. Ozzy, thank you for joining me, mate. It's a pleasure to have you on.
Yeah, mate, it's great to be here. Thanks for having me on.
It's all good. It's good. Let's start with just right at the beginning. I think this is the kind of the best thing to kind of delve into. How did you sort of get into esports? How did gaming come about? What's your kind of your first insights into gaming? And then how did that lead to you becoming a professional player? Then of course on broadcast too, all of the good stuff. Where did gaming start for you?
Right, yeah. So I mean, obviously, I think like every people, like most people, I started when I was young, just playing
Mhm.
like Nintendo stuff like that. And I
Yeah,
think the first PC game that I played was and it was like
classic.
it's like the first competitive game as well on
Mhm.
COD 4 it was.
Oh, what a game!
Um,
What a game!
yeah, yeah. And then from there, I moved in CS about 2014,
Mhm.
and then from there, pretty much, I just played CS up until Valorant's released, and then uh, that the way I got into esports was I think I was playing like ESL UK Premiership.
Yes.
I think I played it first. I was actually in like the main season. I think only
Okay.
about like a year after starting playing. So I
That's not bad.
played in there for quite a while.
Is there any
Um,
notable names in that Premiership team that are still around? 'Cause I know a lot of those old school UK CS guys are still kind of kicking about in some way.
um, I can't remember the lineup. I was in a few. God, I think the first like probably notable
Mhm.
team I was in was probably with JChem, which is probably like a
Okay,
an
all right.
original UK CS name.
Yeah. Okay. Fair enough.
But yeah, I think I've been in quite a few teams over my time in CS. So
Decent. And
yeah.
what about Valorant? When did that sort of opportunity come around for you? Because obviously you mentioned you play with CS for a bit. You're doing sort of pretty decent to be getting into ESL Prem and all that for UK. But when did Valorant for you kind of really turn your attention? And what kind of made you go for the switch?
I mean, I wasn't really playing anything at the time. I think I'd quit CS. I finished uni and I sort of
Sure.
was doing all that stuff, and I wasn't really playing at the time because I sort of stopped playing CS
Yeah.
around 2018. So I was working and pretty much saw that Valorant came out and started playing in Bayer, and then after a while, I was like, okay, all these players that I played with in
Mhm.
UK CS and stuff moved over.
Sure.
So I was like, and they were doing really good. Like some of them got signed for Liquid, etc.
Yeah. The
Artisan
wanted blue
G2,
fish
for
guys. Yeah.
example. And I was obviously already playing with these guys a lot and on a similar level in CS. So I was like, okay, I can definitely do this. So I pretty much just flat out quit my job, used my savings, and
Awesome.
more or less just like went out on a whim and just like played from there.
So you basically took a risk, right? You took the risk of kind of
Yeah.
like going out of your comfort zone with the job and just saying, giving it a good go. And when kind of the beta was out, when you were playing in the really early stages, did you kind of see yourself as already being a little bit better than some of the general consensus of people there? Could you already see yourself as potentially seeing that career even in like the earlier stages?
Yeah, I mean, I think when like Valorant came out, I
Mm.
think some players came from different games and a lot
Yeah.
of them didn't have like the CS fundamentals
Hmm.
in terms of like understanding the game, and I sort of picked up the abilities pretty fast and understood like how the game was going to play out in terms of like rounds and stuff pretty
Mm.
early. Like putting a lot of value into like the ults, etc. And so I sort of understood that early. So I felt like I had sort of somewhat of like a good understanding from early on,
Yeah, that makes
pretty
sense.
much.
And I guess for you as well, one of your kind of your biggest early opportunities was XL, right? How did that sort of come about? Or how did the kind of the really solidified professional side of Valorant come out for you? And sort of what got you noticed to get picked up?
I mean, I was playing on like probably the best free agent team, no poaching at the time.
I remember good old days. I
Yeah,
casted you
I think
way
you
back
casted
when.
it. Yeah,
Yeah,
Epic Land, I think it was.
no
Yeah.
poaching was the good old days. They were unstoppable for a while as well.
Yeah, so I think we were the best free agent team at the time, and
Mm,
I was good friends with Mo, who was playing on XL at the time,
yeah,
and I think that I'd also previously trialed in the first iteration of XL.
sure.
Um, so the coaching staff were sort of aware of me then,
Mhm.
and then from there it sort of fit together. They sort of were aware that I was probably like the best free agent IGL at the time, so I think that's sort of how it fit together, and we trialed and it worked out pretty well.
Awesome. And what was it like playing for kind of such a mammoth org? Because I think a lot of people, especially when it's kind of your first big org, or if it is kind of one of the early orgs, there's a lot of pressure there, right? Playing for that, you're representing in terms of you're playing within Polaris, for example. Those sort of big competitions. For you, did you ever feel the pressure, or were you kind of just any day at work, basically?
I mean, I didn't really feel like org pressure. I mean,
Hmm.
I think previous to that, obviously, I'd like stood into G2, and I think that was
Yeah,
probably that was sort of the
different
period.
level.
Yeah, because you see a lot of people like talking about you, etc. I think that was the
Hmm.
first time I was uh, like thinking about more like fan perspective, etc. And
Sure.
I don't think the Excel thing really bothered me, honestly. I was just like, okay, I'm just here to play and
You're used
do
to
my
it, kind of
best.
thing.
Like I don't, yeah, I mean, yeah, I think it's just about like not really thinking about that sort of thing because it's not
Yeah.
really something that's in your control. Like you can't really control like what people think, and
Hmm.
you just got to do your best, really. So
Yeah.
that's sort of my perspective on the entire thing.
On that note, have you ever sort of had any sort of negative or kind of weird fan interactions? Because I guess when you're like playing with G2 or playing with XO, there's a lot of eyes watching you, and I think it's kind of a side that's not really touched on, kind of for pro players when you get criticism, for example, or anything like that. Have you ever had that sort of thing for you?
I mean, most of my stuff came from CS, really. Like
Mhm.
I remember playing like some HLTV games and like some cups and stuff, and I'd get like death threats to my Facebook and stuff like that when I lost and stuff like that.
Insane, yeah.
But in Valorant, honestly, it's not been too bad. I think the most like volatile like fan base is usually like I think probably the Spanish and also Turkish. I think those are like super passionate. So like
Yeah.
they if like you lose and you're like there because for example like G2 like there's a lot of
Mhm.
Spanish fans, Mixer has a lot of Spanish fans. So I think really depends on like who's playing. But I haven't really I had way more in CS. Like I'd get a lot in CS. I think
Yeah.
anyone who played like officials and like a lot of the like tier 2 tier 3 cups in
Mhm.
CS they all would get a lot, especially when you lose, you'd get a lot of Steam messages, Steam ads,
It's still
Steam
the same as
comments.
well. Hasn't changed at all. It's still equally as bad from what
Yeah,
I've seen as well. So of course now you're representing, or you've just finished representing, kind of sort of Wave in the second split of the regional leagues. And how did Wave come about? Obviously quite a well known org and fairly decent performances in the DAC region. And of course you made the switch from Polaris, which is the Northern Europe and UK, to the DAC region. How did that one come about?
I mean, pretty much like I got benched like super late in the off season, so I pretty much missed out on like a lot of the changes that sort of
Right.
came along in the time. And I was like, okay, I don't want to sit out a season. I want to play.
Yeah, for sure.
And I think pretty much like that was the best opportunity at the time
Hmm.
that I saw really, and there wasn't because there wasn't many like it was so late in the off
Hmm.
season, so I was like, okay, I'm just gonna take this and see how it goes, and that's sort of how it came about to joining them.
Makes sense. Makes sense. This is one question that was, I think it's proposed on Reddit, but I wanted to add it into this section in terms of kind of XL, right? So,
Yeah,
for you guys, you made it to the finals, right? The VRL finals, which, if you make it through that, that could have got you a VCT position. I know it was Focus who ended up making it through.
yeah.
But so what do you think went wrong? I think a lot of people believed XL were like really one of the best teams, and I was
Yeah.
fully on that bandwagon. I really liked the team. I thought going in towards kind of the regional league finals that potentially there was maybe a dream run for the UK and Northern Europe. What do you think sort of went wrong? Because you did so well domestically, but then kind of internationally not look like the same.
Well, like initially, like the first game we played against Surreal, my internet lagged out for the entire best of three, so
Damn.
I actually had to like not play the second map, and then
Mhm.
we lost 2-0. So that's like, firstly, that's like a really bad start, and I think mentally it puts you in a bit of
Yeah.
a shit place. From there we beat Sector One, who's obviously won the French league, and I
Mhm.
think that's pretty decent. They were good at the time.
Yeah.
And then we played a Surreal again. I think that it came down to best of three triple OT on final map
Yeah, I
after an
remember.
OT on the previous map. I think the entire best of three was about 4 hours or 3 hours, something like that.
Long day.
I think that like we definitely didn't play to our level. I think we sort of hit a like a down sort of
I get you.
spot, like yeah, more like a down sort of period in that during that
Yes.
time as
Yeah.
well individually, and I think it sort of came at the wrong time.
Hmm.
I think that team could have done really good, and obviously we proved we did well. I don't necessarily think we hit the peak really. I
Hmm.
think there was definitely a lot of stuff we could have improved on. So
For sure.
I think the team could have gone further. It was just sort of a bit of, in my opinion, like somewhat unfortunate circumstances and maybe like slight underperformance. Yeah,
Yeah, and things like your internet as well. I mean, it's just so out of your hands, which is so unfortunate. So there's
yeah,
nothing really you can do. I think as well, like for XL, they've always been a team that's done so well domestically. And again, we've kind of saw it in the regional leagues for the second split. And obviously, you were on the desk for that. Kind of, what was your thoughts in the comparisons between, when you were part of XL in that first split and then the second split, where they again made it to the regional leagues, but then this time it was not as great for them. What were your thoughts this time being on the kind of the other side of the camera, essentially?
yeah. I mean, I think they had to play some pretty hard teams in Case and Vitality.
Yeah.
But I think I don't necessarily think like they improved a huge amount. I think the level was more or less the same for
Yeah,
them.
agreed.
They didn't really have to beat as many good teams going into it. Like if you look at the Polaris last time and then
Mhm.
compare it to now, it was sort of easier. But they still made it there, and they still got to more or less the same periods. I mean, I think they were still like pretty good.
Yeah, for
Uh,
sure.
yeah, I think one other thing is they like that iterational team also got a boot camp, which never really got as well. So,
Okay.
and I actually think like just as a point, like I think that boot camps and stuff like that is super important. I think that actually playing the tournaments on the boot camp is important as well. Like
Hmm.
for example, against Surreal, if I'd have played on like obviously on a boot camp, I wouldn't have had internet issues,
There we
and
go. Yeah.
it's stuff like that. Like I think it's super important. So like anyone, any orgs watching,
Yeah,
yeah,
I
make
agree.
that like if your team's ever playing like an important tournament,
Mhm.
let them play on a in a boot camp
Together.
pretty
Yeah,
much.
yeah.
Yeah,
I think it builds kind of team like synergy and cohesion and stuff like that as well,
yeah,
which
that's true.
really, really helps. And if you look at the finals as well, both Case and Foot were on boot camp, and well, Foot ended
Yeah,
up winning it. Did you expect Foot to win it? I think for me, I definitely caught me off guard. I kind of thought Case or Vitality would take it. Foot ended up
I
winning it.
mean,
What were your
yeah,
thoughts?
I mean, I think that they're always a really good team in Prague.
Mm,
I think they had some like previous underperformance in the I think the previous regional finals.
sure.
Like I think I don't know if they even made it to the finals last time. I mean they might have done, I can't remember. But like, you know they're a good team and they got some good players
Mm,
like that QE guy. I think
yeah.
everyone knows they have good players. But I think they just hadn't really shown it, and I didn't really necessarily think they could have won it, but I think they were like a top three, top four team
For sure.
easily. Actually I would say the top four would be like XL, Case, Vitality, and then Foot.
Hmm.
Um, Obviously it didn't really turn out like that, but
Yeah.
yeah, I think they were definitely up there, but I wouldn't necessarily put them to win.
Awesome, fair enough. You sort of already slightly touched there, but I want to kind of bring it back to kind of Polaris, right? I think
Yeah,
there's a lot of question marks about the region, right? I think there's talent. If you look towards season one as well, when it had Alliance, 10 Star, and XL, the three sort
yeah,
of titans who went flawless through the qualification. You know, you guys didn't even drop a map, all three of you. And I mean, I think it was one of the most stacked regions. A lot of people saw it as one of the most stacked regions. And then into Split 2, I think it's safe to say. I mean, from my perspective, when I was commentating it, it always just seemed like XL were the only team really competing.
yeah.
What do you think needs to happen to sort of make Polaris be, in a lot of people's eyes, kind of one of the best regions once again?
Yeah, I mean, I think I heard that they might be changing like the way the regional slots work, like the residency stuff, and I think that if that was the case, then Polaris would have like easily the best players,
Hmm.
like because I think a lot of the best players are like Northern Europe area and like Nordic in general.
Yeah,
So I think if that happens and you needed like three players from a region or you needed two, whatever, then it would be like a super stacked region. I think it was just more that a lot of the players that were in that period, like in that region, either went to like VCT,
true.
um, or they've joined another team in another region. So it was like you sort of
Yeah.
lost a lot of the good teams. And I think I would say
Hmm.
Finest were a good team, that's like the core of the Tundra lineup. But I think that even then, I think the Tundra lineup like was like better than the Finest one. So I don't know. It was like
Yeah.
I think it was just like if you just like enforce that residency rule, I
Hmm.
think that there will be like way more like players coming back.
Awesome. Yeah, that makes sense. And I wanted to sort of touch because you've obviously played in two different regions now. You played in Polaris
Yeah.
and the DAC region. What are your thoughts on the two comparatively? Is there similarities? What's the differences between the two in terms of kind of is there micro play styles, the level, etc. Kind of what are your thoughts now having played both in the DAC region and Polaris?
I'm not sure it's like really comparable because I think that like the first like season of Polaris we played, like I think those teams could have easily been in like VCT, like Alliance, 10
Yeah.
Star, like
Hmm.
next. I think they were all teams that were like pretty much close to VCT level, and I think
Hmm.
that like the DAC, I think the only like there was a few good teams. Well, I don't know. I think none of the teams really lived up to any of their expectations, like Desire and Miles. And
Hmm.
I think that Angry Titans actually surprised me a lot and proved they're a really good team. So I mean,
Sure.
fair play to them. You got to give them a lot of props for that. In
Yeah.
terms of like comparison, I'm not sure. Like I think that in general, I think that a lot of the lower teams in the DAC region, they kind of play a bit random, and they're just like
Sure.
I don't think they're kind of hard to like play against. Like it was definitely like honestly, I found it hard to play against them because I just didn't expect a lot of the plays they were doing. Because it's like
Right. Yeah. Just a random.
I don't know, yeah, it was like
Yeah.
kind of random, and I was like some of the stuff was kind of weird. So I think like for example, that Ovation team,
Hmm.
they came on like Breeze or whatever. They had this like comp with like Yora and Reina or what I think something like that,
Fair
and
enough.
you
Never
never
see
ever see
that.
that in
Yeah.
any other region. Like that's pretty much the only thing I'd say really about it.
Do you think that each kind of region has their own micro metas, and do you think that was the kind of the case within the DAC region compared to playing Split One in Polaris? Was there kind of a completely different like meta for the region specifically?
Not really. I think that the only thing I'd say is like the DAC teams are more. are not afraid to like experiment with comps. Like I remember seeing
Oh,
sort of
okay,
like
sure.
I remember playing against a Viper on Ascent, for example, and I was just like, what
Right.
is this?
Okay.
Like this is
Okay.
just like I don't know. So that was the
Bit
only
out
thing I'd
there.
say. Like I think
Sure.
that a lot of the teams that like in Polaris season 1 were like playing sort of the meta and just like
Yeah. Agreed.
generally like playing more like
Mhm.
trying to think of the word, like yeah, like more
The
like
most like standard
comps,
what you'd
yeah, standard
expect.
comps
Yeah,
basically,
yeah,
yeah.
exactly. If I had to put you on the spot right now, what is the most competitive region? What's better out of DAC and Polaris?
If we just look at like the previous season just gone,
Yeah,
do you
go
mean?
for that. Yeah.
Probably, I'd say probably the French one. I think
Okay.
the French
Okay.
VRL. I think
Yeah.
it's very close between the France and Spanish, but I think the French one actually had a lot of good teams, and I think that
Yeah. The viewership
uh
was insane as well. I don't know if you
yeah,
saw
that's
the,
true.
the stadium
Yeah,
of like Carmine Corp and Vitality.
yeah,
There was like
yeah,
10,000 people. Like that is
yeah.
like
That's
a
crazy.
dream for a regional league.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I think that the Spanish was like slightly lower level this time around
Mhm.
than previous. I think if you asked me last, I would have said like obviously Polaris because I think that was obvious, and I think I
Yeah.
even got flamed. I even got flamed for that, but it's like how
I'd
can you even?
agree. I mean, with the
You know, but
teams we had, yeah.
you can't like if you looked at like because it was just coming from VCT. If you looked like just coming from VCT, like
Mhm.
who did the best, it was those teams. So, I mean, I got flamed for it,
Exactly.
but yeah.
I agree.
But anyway, yeah. But anyway, yeah. Now the Spanish one was this worse this time around in my opinion. So I think that
Mm.
was more the sort of the French one that was better.
For sure. Now I'm going to lean into kind of you as an individual. Who would you say is kind of the best player that you've ever played with? That you've ever had the not really in pugs, but more like in teams. Who's the best player you've ever played with?
Best player I've ever played with. I think if we look at Excel, I'd say probably Chihuahua. I think he's
Ah, okay, I agree.
very
He's
unique,
amazing.
very unique play style. I think that he doesn't play like any other player. I think he's one of those players. He's very,
Hmm.
I wouldn't say impulsive, but he likes to play his own way and he does things. He's not afraid to take
Yeah,
risks. Like
he's the
he's
king
that
of the
sort of
lurk
player.
as well. He
Yeah,
loves the
exactly.
lurk, and I
Yeah,
think that for XL is one of their strongest things. Because he gains so much
yeah.
information
No,
all the
he was
time.
definitely like the most important player for them. I think that the way their play style works and the way he plays around, well, they play around him, I think really works for them. And I think he was definitely like, I think him and Alive were definitely like the best
For sure.
players.
And then in terms of whether it's playing against or playing with in like a pug or ranked or whatever, who's the best player you've either come against or played alongside, whether it's like ranked or a pug or a scrim or whatnot? Who's like the one player that just stands out as just being ridiculous?
Any Turkish jet player in ranked, like
Those
any Turkish
gods.
jet player. Yeah, they're all insane.
And then go to the other side. Is there any sort of person that you would say is like really underrated? I think is someone that you maybe think doesn't get the recognition that they probably deserve.
Just any player.
Yeah, just anyone, whether it's like someone that you've either watched or someone that you've played alongside or played in a ranked with or whatever.
Oh, that's a hard one.
Hmm.
Underrated. Mm. Alright, well, I need to check VLR one sec.
Go on, have a look, have a look.
Give me a second. You put me on the spot here. Okay, so I'd say like out of the tier two teams,
Hmm.
she's pretty good. I'd say probably is Alive. I don't know how hyped he is. I don't really check like forums and stuff that much, but
Hmm.
I think Alive is definitely an underrated player. I think he showed he's very good. And I don't know how. I'm guessing a lot of like VCT teams will be looking at him, but I don't really know. I can't really gauge how
Yeah.
hyped he is or whatever. So I'd say he's pretty underrated.
Do you think he's one of those players as well who, if he got picked up by a VCT team, let's say when the partnerships comes around, come like 2023, and the
Yeah.
teams are gonna look for players. Do you think he's one of those players who, if he did get picked up by a franchise team, that he would be absolutely fine at that level? It would be like he'd still perform really well.
I think that maybe he'd need like a little bit of adaptation just to get used to it, but I think he definitely has the individual skill, and I think he's shown it playing in this team. I think before XL, I think his team got relegated like in finest to
Ah,
the
yeah.
VRCs, so it's like everyone knew he had like good individual skill, but
Mhm.
like the team wasn't doing well, so you're like, does he have any impact, etc. But I think he showed in XL that he's definitely
Okay.
like up to the level.
For sure. And for you individually, why did you sort of lean into the IGL role? What kind of tempted you to lean into? Because it's normally one of those roles that is, in some cases, not really rewarding. You don't get the stats as if you're like a jet, for example, a duelist, you're gonna get like heaps worth of stats. What made you lean into the IGL role? And would you kind of say that you were one of those people who's always like maybe a little bit of a leader?
Yeah, no, I think that's definitely the case. I think that I've always been a vocal player. I've always
Mhm.
been very always wanted to get my point across and
For
sort
sure.
of like put my ideas across in game. And I think after sort of time playing and getting
Mhm.
older, etc., I think you sort of it's because it's a big responsibility. I think you sort of lean into that responsibility and you're like, okay, I can do this. And that's sort of how it started for me. I think I was, like I said, I was always vocal, so it wasn't very hard for me to transition. I just needed to sort
For
of
sure.
understand like what I need to do pretty much as an IHL, and that was sort of how it came across.
Makes
Came
sense.
along.
Makes sense. And then okay, this is a bit of a rogue one. This one might take you to think. So if professional Valorant playing kind of wasn't, if you know you no longer could be a professional player, it wasn't an option anymore. What
Yeah.
would you do next? What would be the kind of next steps? Would you know, some people lean into content creation, or you know, we've kind of seen you on the desk recently.
Yeah.
Maybe another game. What would be the next step for you if
Yeah, I
professional
mean,
Valorant was an option?
I mean, honestly, like I've been toying with it a bit, but I think that it probably would be the desk. Honestly, like
Mhm.
I think with some time I could be really good on that.
Yeah,
Not sure I'm like 100% ready to sort of stop playing yet, but I mean,
for sure.
I'm sure at like some point I'll get to that point when I'll want to stop playing, and I
Yeah.
think I'd still like to like do like some analyst desks whenever I've got time because I think it's really fun and I
Mhm.
think that I've got a lot to bring for that.
Could you ever
I
see
think
yourself being a coach? Because obviously an IGL into like a coach is it seems like a somewhat easy transition in terms of the knowledge, but just on a basic form. Could you ever see yourself doing that? Maybe you know coaching one of a decent team coming through.
Yeah, I think I'd be a really good team. But I think honestly, like the only thing is like when you're in esports for so many years, and obviously I'm coming up to like 6, 7 years now in
For
esports.
sure.
I think that it's very easy to sort of get like burnt out and just like not want to do it anymore. So I think I'll come
Agreed.
to a point. I'll probably come to a point where I'm just like, I just want to chill,
Done.
you know.
Yeah,
But
I
I
get
mean, we'll
it.
see. I will see. I think times can change. I might feel like the hunger to become the best coach or whatever. But
Who
I mean,
knows?
right now I'm just happy like trying to do my best playing.
Yeah, I feel
Uh,
that.
and I think that if like analyst wasn't a thing, then I mean, like I've got my like degree or whatever, so I'd probably end up like if I didn't want to do anything to do with esports, I'd probably go become a lawyer or something like
Okay. And we
that.
can talk about the desk as well because obviously you graced your presence on the VRL finals desk. Unfortunately,
Yeah,
you're a day just before I got there, but
yeah. Fortunate.
obviously it was kind of your first proper time on a desk, quite a big event. How did that opportunity come about, and sort of how did it feel to kind of be on the other side of the server?
Yeah, I mean, I think it was pretty much just like I was just said like, well, we basically didn't make playoffs. So I was just like said to my agent like, if there any opportunities come along, like I'd definitely be interested in doing it. And
Awesome.
then because I'd actually previously, I think year before, I'd spoke to someone from like Freaks View, and they
Mhm.
like so obviously must have planted some sort of idea in
Some
the head or whatever.
okay, sure.
But yeah, no, that was pretty much it. And then I was just like, sorry, what was the second part of the question?
Just like obviously, how did they come about, and how did it feel like to be on the desk?
Oh, how did it feel? Yeah.
Because you're used to being in the server. We're used to kind of talking about you. How did it feel to be the person talking about others, kind of being on the other side of the camera?
Yeah, I mean, it was cool, honestly, like seeing a lot of the players that you usually like play against and with,
Yeah,
being able to talk about them and sort of give
roast them a little
more,
bit.
yeah, just a little bit, and then also give like kind of insider perspective because I think a lot of these teams I've played against a lot and players, etc. So I felt like it was like I had a bit of an edge where I could just like say
Yeah,
like a lot of the stuff that I already like 100% knew and
for
sort of
sure.
give that insider. So it was nice to be on that side and I think it was like a very unique experience that I haven't done before really.
Mhm. So you could definitely see yourself kind of full time doing this, like you know, being on the desk. Would that be something, you know, if the opportunity came and they were like, okay, we want you full time to be, you know, one of the members of the desk? Would you happily say yes to it?
I mean, honestly, like I'm not sure, like right at this moment, I would do it, but
Mhm.
I
At
think that it
some
really
point.
depends. It really depends, like on
Yeah.
the situation. I think
Mhm.
that I'd be really good at that, good
For
on
sure.
it, and I think that if I give myself more time, like, and I learn how to like project my voice and talk properly, etc., and become like a proper person who's able to speak on broadcast
Mhm.
properly. Because I would say I noticed like obviously first time doing it, I've never done anything like that before. I could see my shortcomings in that aspect. So I think
Yeah,
if I gave
it's
myself the
all
time, I'd definitely
experience.
do it.
I think for your first time, like, killed it. I mean, like, it's all experience. I mean, my first, if that was my first time going on the desk, I definitely wouldn't have been even nearly as good. So you killed it. Don't worry.
I
So
appreciate it.
obviously now as well, there's a lot of sort of downtime, right? I mean, we've kind of got one major kind of first party tournament. We've got potentially a couple of third party tournaments coming up to at the end of the year, but
Yeah.
it's kind of coming to the end of the season for Valorant. What
Yeah.
are we going to see you doing for kind of the well? I guess until 2023 and until that sort of kicks off again. What's the plan for you? Have you got anything in the works? Are you doing anything? What's the plans?
Yeah, I mean, I've tried for a few teams.
Mhm.
I'm still under contract with Wave for now for a very short
Yeah.
period of time. So,
Are we allowed to know
uh,
what teams? So is that insider
nah,
goss?
that's a leak, unfortunately.
Yeah,
But yeah, it's usually like I think it's mostly like tier 2 teams. So,
sure.
no, nothing VCT yet. But I
Mhm.
think that, yeah, I mean, pretty much I'm just seeing what opportunities I can get,
Awesome.
trying to improve my individual level. Because I think that in the last few seasons, like I don't think I've hit my peak necessarily.
Okay.
So I'm pretty much working on that, and I'm basically just seeing like what I can get for the next season because I really want to play and sort of
Awesome.
see what I can do.
And is there any potential to see you in any of the kind of the third-party tournaments? I know there's potentially kind of like the Blast Ignition, there's Rebel Campus Clutch, and a couple of other sort of random, pretty big ones. Is there any potential we're going to see you in any of those?
I mean, it depends on what teams get invited and what team I end up joining. So, I mean, I think if I got the chance, I'd love to play them because I think that it's a really good chance to show yourself. And I think before franchise, I think it's really important that there's going to be a lot of players in these tournaments that are going to show themselves and probably end up getting picked up for one of the franchise teams. So, I mean, I'd love to play them if I get the opportunity. And I guess we just have to see what happens.
Awesome. And a last question on this section. Of course, at the time of recording this, I think it was just yesterday or the day before yesterday, I'm pretty sure we had the kind of the announcement of what the structure is going to look like for 2023. And I don't know if you've taken a look at it. I'm assuming you probably have. But what's your thoughts on it? What's your thoughts on kind of how it looks? Because that's very new information. That's sort of kind of refreshing.
I think it's really good. I think the important thing about that is the fact that there is a chance to actually get into the franchise.
Yeah.
I think that'll motivate a lot of orgs to sort of still invest in the tier 2 scene because a lot of them will be like, I think if that wasn't the case, then a lot of orgs that would like otherwise be in the esport wouldn't join because there was like no chance to get to the top level. And I think that most orgs' goal is to get that top level. So I think it'll continue to sort of make orgs want to invest, and I think that it creates sort of a more stable infrastructure to where players can like prove themselves and sort of even as a team take themselves to franchise. And I also heard there's like an anti-poaching rule for teams that get into franchising as well. So I think that sort of creates more of a, and I also heard there's open qualifiers as well. So I think that it's like it creates a really like open infrastructure where you actually like can prove yourself even if you're like not a notable player. So I think it's really good.
Yeah, I think it's. I think a lot of people were very concerned, kind of when you talk about franchising. You know, you're having 10 teams per region and whatnot. It can get concerning that basically every other org is never going to have a shot to get to that top level. So I think it's refreshing to see that there's definitely a path there. And of course, I think it motivates a lot of orgs, as you mentioned, to actually still invest in tier 2 because there's definitely that potential to make the run through.
For sure, yeah. I think that's the main thing that I took from that, and I think that's going to be really important going forward.
Awesome. Now let's move on to our second section. This is more just about you. So you as a person. So what was it like growing up? Of course, you're British. What was life like growing up? Where are you from? What did you do kind of at a young age, kind of before you got into esports?
Yeah, so I mean, I'm from Chester, so that's like a city that's pretty much like on the border with Wales.
Sure.
And I also grew up in Wales for a part period as well. I mean, I think it's pretty normal. I think a lot of the stuff you do as a kid's pretty much. I mean, I'm 24 now, so I think that I've sort of seen a lot of the different sort of like the internet come and like grow and stuff like that. And I think that obviously as a gamer, I spent a lot of time on the internet as well. And gaming was like a large part of my like childhood as well. So I liked playing football as a kid. Don't think there's much else really to go into it, honestly.
Kind of before PC as well, like before kind of getting into sort of CS. You mentioned like kind of like 2014. What sort of games were you playing then? I know like kind of when I was younger, it was like quite a lot of FIFA and then like Pokemon when I was like really younger. Those kind of things. Well, for you, what were the games playing when you were like growing up?
I really liked like single player games, so I played a lot of them when I was young. And I've always sort of enjoyed like single player games in general. So that was the sort of games, and I think as soon as I played like COD and like saw like competitive esports, I was like, I don't think you can really like go back to just playing like. I mean, obviously I still played like single player games here and there, but I think that once you get a taste of that, it's like very very different, and you sort of like it's like a new world, and you just like want to sort of hop into it, and that's sort of what I did.
Yeah, I feel that. And of course, for you now, you mentioned 24. You've had a degree and stuff. What are your sort of your hobbies, interests outside of esports? What are the stuff you kind of like to get up to when you're kind of not competing or practicing or anything like that?
Yeah, I mean, I'm a big movie fan, so I like spend a lot of time watching movies.
Nice.
I'm a big fanatic of that.
Sure. Favorite movie on the spot.
Favorite movie.
That's the hardest question ever because I don't think I'd even be able to answer that. But if you've got one or a couple to choose from.
Yeah, I'd probably say Blade Runner. That's my favorite movie.
The old one or the new one?
I mean, if you give me a couple, I'd say probably both. Honestly,
Okay,
it's
sure.
really good two movies. So
Sure,
that's probably
I
that's
haven't,
probably
I
my
haven't
favorite.
seen them, so I actually,
You need to go watch it.
I'll put it on the watch list. Like, all right, that
Yeah.
sounds good. And you mentioned movies. You mentioned football as well. Do you follow football at all? Do you just support a team?
No, I don't really follow it much these days, but I've always been a Liverpool fan. So
Oh, good lad. Good
whenever I
lad.
do check, I do tend to follow Liverpool for the
Yeah,
most part.
I'm also a Liverpool fan. Good lad, good lad. We're doing all right ish, but yeah, not bad. So, kind of for you, I want you to run me through what a sort of a daily routine looks like for you, because I think every sort of person has their different things they like to do, and kind of give me one that maybe doesn't include an official, and then one that does.
Okay, so I think these days I've been trying to walk my dog, so that
Nice.
probably start well, not obviously you get like your shower, etc.
Sure. Yeah.
The usual stuff. But
The
I think usually
classics. Yeah, yeah.
I usually try to get like a walk with my dog, and
Sure.
that's like my main thing in the morning. During off season, I don't know. I've obviously been playing less, but I try and play like I've not really figured out what best time to play is, but I think the evening is usually the time that I like
Yeah,
to
I'd
play.
agree. Yeah.
What else? Yeah, I mean, obviously a lot of it changed, but I think that's like the main thing. And try
Mhm.
to, well, less recently, but I've been like I try to work out sometimes as well. I think that's really important for esports
Yeah, I
in
agree.
general. That's that's pretty much it. Then
That's
I
it.
just
Yeah,
obviously
yeah.
do like I like errands or
Hmm.
whatever I need to do in the day, and
Yeah.
then I try to chill out at night. And
Hmm.
yeah, like I said, I'm a movie fan, so I try and watch movies, series,
Beauty.
etc. So it's usually what I do in the evening.
Nice. And for you, when you have a sort of an official or like a scrim, what's your sort of warm up routine? I know a lot of players have different. Some people kind of spend ages doing aim labs or death matches. Some players just like to play scrims or ranked. What's like kind of your warm up routine when you have an official?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's changed over time. I think I used to DM a lot.
Hmm.
But now I think usually these days, I think about 30 minutes deathmatch before is usually enough.
Sure.
I think sometimes what I do is like if I feel nervous or something, I do like breathing exercises.
Okay.
That helps me relax a lot. And feel sort of calm going into an official. And then yeah, pretty much just 30 minutes DM. And I think when you get older and the longer you play, I think the less like warm up you need.
Yeah. No,
I
I
think
feel that.
that's sort of something I've sort of seen as like when you play with younger players, they're all like, "Oh, yeah, I've been on aim lab for 2 hours or whatever,"
Hours.
and
Yeah, yeah.
I'm
Every
just like,
time.
"What are you doing?"
Yeah.
And so like, yeah, I think you sort of like get more efficient and just like
Hmm.
need less warm up the more you played over time. So
Hmm.
that's sort of how it is for me. It's pretty simple. I think that it's important not to overthink these sort of things,
Yeah,
but it's
for
also
sure.
important to have like consistency with what you do and try and keep it the same. So yeah,
Yeah, I like how you mentioned sort of the breathing exercise side of thing. Do you think
yeah.
there's that kind of a real importance in terms of kind of the mental side of things? I think it's safe to say a lot. You mentioned young players, right? Those guys will go in 2 hours of aim labs, death match, whatever, but they never really take a moment to kind of like think and really kind of get themselves mentally in the same headspace. Do you think that's kind of one of those things that's kind of slept on a little bit?
Yeah, I mean, honestly, like from my experience, like when your mind is like you got a lot of thoughts in your mind and
Mhm.
you're sort of not really calm, I think that's when you
Yeah,
sort of play the worst and you start overthinking. I think that when you've got a completely like calm mind and you don't really have any thoughts going through and you're just sort of in the moment, I think that's like the period when you play best. So I
for sure.
try and get into that headspace. I try not to like take too much caffeine, etc. I think all that
Okay.
stuff is really bad for you. Like you want to try and make your sort of mind is like
Oh.
quiet as possible, pretty much. So
So you're not
that's
like
sort of
kind of
my
a
goal.
coffee before a game sort of person.
No, I don't honestly. I think that it's really important to like have a consistent sort of
Hmm.
energy level, etc. So I think
Okay.
that I try and only stay to like one coffee in the morning. And I try not to touch caffeine for the rest of the day,
That's really
pretty
interesting,
much.
actually. That's sort of one of those things that you see a lot of players, or like a lot of players drink like loads of like Red Bull and G Fuel and stuff like that, and like, you're kind of like the other way. It's sort of an interesting thing. But I sort of agree with you, right? Because if you're having fluctuating energy and
Yeah,
caffeine, you're not going to be consistent. So it makes complete sense when you think about it. So
definitely.
for you, you mentioned you've got a degree. If you weren't involved in esports at all, would that be then what you fall back into? And what is your degree as well?
Honestly, I've thought about it. I'm not sure really. I like the 9 to 5. So
I'm with you there. I'm with you.
after you work in esports, it's like
Yeah.
I don't know how you can ever go back to doing like a 9 to 5 or whatever. But
Yeah, I feel
I
you.
think that I've always enjoyed like so my degrees in law, and I've always enjoyed law.
Nice.
I think it's really
Hmm.
like it's a very interesting topic, and I think that it probably would be something I'd go into more if I didn't do esports. But
Sure.
I think that the flexibility you have with esports is what makes it really good, and I think the
Hmm.
fact that your hours are pretty much like
Whatever you want
not
them to be,
not
kind of thing.
conventional for the most part, I think it's fine. And but yeah, it
Mm.
depends on your team or whatever your job you do. I think for example, if you're on Desk Talent or whatever, it's very sort of freelance work. So generally, you sort of only have like set periods where you need to be doing a certain thing. Other than that, you're pretty much on your own time. So
Yeah, for sure.
I think that that's sort of what makes esports great, and I think I probably would end up doing something to do with law, but I do really enjoy esports as a sort of industry in general. So I think I'd definitely like to try
Try
something
and
inside
combine
esports
them.
if I had. I mean, I could do that as well, but I think
Yeah,
that any sort of esports job is like better than working like a 9 to 5, to be honest.
yeah. No,
As
I
long as the
agree.
industry as long as the industry is like as grown as it is or it's doing well, I think
Mhm.
that it's always going to be more attractive to me.
Yeah, I feel like. So there's potential maybe in sort of 20 years time we could see you as an esports lawyer, something along those lines.
Yeah, well, I guess we'll have to see.
And then this is an interesting one that I always kind of like to ask people. Like for you, was it like an interesting conversation or like a hard conversation or an easy conversation with like your parents or your family, kind of talking about, okay, I'm gonna go full time esports? Because I guess for you, you got your degree in law, and then you're telling them, I'm gonna go pro as a player. Like, was that a hard conversation, or was it really easy for them to kind of understand?
Well, it didn't really go like that. So it was like more like, okay, so I was playing like semi professional, I guess, and I
Sure.
was playing like ESL Prem, and I was still in like school. I finished my like A levels and stuff, and
Mm.
so I was always pretty much playing whilst in school and
Yeah,
stuff, and I sort of went to uni as soon as I turned 18, and I instantly was like competing whilst in uni. So pretty much my CS career was pretty much me during uni, like
for
the
sure.
entire period. And I think that the first time I sort of really spoke to my mum about it, because she was always like, when I was younger, she was always like turning my internet off when it got late, and
I'm there.
'cause
Yeah,
obviously,
I feel
yeah, like all that sort of
that.
stuff. So like when I was young, so like when I got to around 18, I got invited to go to a LAN in China,
Oh
and
wow.
like my mum was like, that was sort of the proper conversation. I was like,
She's like,
so where
okay,
she sort of realized like, okay, this is actually real.
right.
Um, so I think that was kind of scary for her, but
Mm.
yeah, I mean, she let me go, and obviously I was 18, so I think I went anyway. I think we had an argument about it, and I think she let me get, and
Okay.
I think I went anyway. So
I
yeah,
respect
anyway.
it. You got to do it sometimes, right? You got to do it. Uh,
But yeah, honestly, it's really hard. I think the hardest thing was like balancing and playing. I think
mhm.
that was the hardest thing I've already done.
And what do
Uh,
they think about it now as well, right? Obviously, you've been full time for quite a while now. You've been kind of making pretty decent waves, both in obviously Polaris and DAC. Kind of what do they think about it? Did they like really like know what you do? Because I know like speaking to my family, I'm like kind of knows what Valorant is, but like not really. So like, do
yeah,
they really know?
yeah. I mean, my mum's pretty in on it. She understands like
Okay,
what's going on.
sure.
Um, yeah, so I think she supports me these days, and obviously I think as long as it's financially
Suppose.
viable,
Yeah, yeah.
I think that it's definitely something like that she supports me, and I think as soon as she saw that I could make money from it, she was
Mhm.
always more supportive. I think it was just her main sort of worry was the financial side of things. But
For sure.
I think that in Valorant, like especially, and obviously the sort of tier that I'm at now, is sort of you can make a pretty good living
Exactly.
from it. So I think as long as it's financially viable, I think she'll always support me.
Awesome. There we go. Well, that concludes all sort of the personal ones. And then the last ones, just a few random ones that I've plucked from Twitter and Reddit and all the good stuff. These are asked by kind of your fans and followers and whatnot. So I thought I'd start with one that I really did like, which was about specifically IGL. So the guy asked us on Reddit, and he was like, what are your thoughts on structured teams of an IGL, FBX, Fnatic, for example, versus the sort of loose faux IGL teams like Liquid and G2? Kind of what are your thoughts on that, kind of the two differences there?
Yeah, I mean, I think that the Liquid and G2 style can definitely work, but I think that you rely a lot on individuals like initiative and
Mm-hmm.
sort of everyone contributing, and I think that you sort of sometimes lack, and you can see it in some of their gameplay, some like decisiveness.
Okay, for sure.
I don't even think the IGL needs to be good, but I think, for example, Scream stepped up now. I think that
Yeah.
as long as you have someone who is being decisive and coming with a final call and
Mm-hmm.
taking the responsibility, I think that's the most important part. It's not about being like a super like big brain IGL. It's
Genius.
just
Yeah,
having
yeah.
someone who has the responsibility to say,
For
okay,
sure.
guys, we're ending here, we're doing this, we're doing that.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas I think when you play in those teams like without any IGL, it's sort of like a bit of a free for all, and when stuff's not
Mm-hmm.
going wrong, no one's really there to like say like to sort of bail you out.
Yeah,
It's sort of there's no responsibility. So I think the most important part about having an agile and being agile is the responsibility that you are
for sure.
making the call, or you're there always there to make the call, no matter like what's going on in game.
Okay, that makes sense. Good answer. Good answer. And another one. This is completely the opposite end of the spectrum. Favorite all-time food or snack? Very
Favorite
much
all-time
off
food or
topic
snack?
here, but yeah.
Oof, oof, oof. I think if we go for snacks, I like Dime bars. Dime bars go crazy,
Okay,
honestly.
that's
Yeah,
old school, but I
that's
like
an
it.
old school one.
Yeah,
Nah,
yeah.
they're good. They're good.
I think not a lot of people even know them because they're UK only, if I'm right in
Yeah, are
saying.
they?
I think so. There might be either UK or maybe some parts of EU. Oh no, I think they're a little
Maybe.
bit in EU as well. Like I've seen them in Sweden, but
Yeah.
NA people I don't think might not even know what they
Nah,
are.
no
But
clue.
do you want
Yeah.
to explain what they are, just in case?
What even what even is the flavor? I don't even know. What is?
It's
They're nice, but I can't even remember what
it's
they are.
like
Dime.
honeycomb basically,
Is
like
it
caramel or something like that.
crunchy almond caramel covered in milk chocolate? Yeah,
There you
that's pretty
go.
much it. Yeah.
Yeah,
So yeah, that's pretty much it. It's nice though. It's
fair
really good.
enough. Fair enough. So next one, best place you've ever visited. Whether this is it might be esports related or it could be just on a holiday. What's the best or the coolest place you've ever gone?
Yeah, I mean, I really like the Caribbean. I've been there a couple of times. I
Okay.
think that's super nice place.
Hmm.
In general, like there's loads of nice islands to go. So
For sure.
I really like the Caribbean.
Awesome. And then what's the best place you've been involved in esports? Like the best, you mentioned you went to China, which I think is like
Yeah,
ridiculous. I mean, you can even elaborate a little bit more on that, but what would you say is the coolest place you've been through esports?
yeah, I'd say it probably would be China, honestly.
Hmm.
I think that yeah, we went on the Great Wall, for example. I think the culture is very different. It
Okay.
was a bit of a culture shock, I think, especially because I
Sure.
was going when I was like 18 or whatever. It was like very different. But in terms of like more recent, I think I really like Berlin. It's a really nice.
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
mean, you obviously went to like Spandau, which is like more or
Hmm.
like more like the
On the
suburbs, I
outskirts.
guess.
Yeah.
Like
Yeah. Yeah.
yeah, but like I think Berlin is like a really cool city. I
Yeah.
like it
Central
more.
Berlin's
I like it more
awesome.
than yeah, I like it more than London, and
Yeah,
it's cheaper.
agreed.
So
Oh yeah, yeah,
yeah.
I know exactly that. What was the LAN in China? I'm very intrigued by that.
Ooh.
What was that LAN?
It was called I think it's WCG or something like that.
Oh, was it
Yeah,
WESG?
no, WCG was like
WCG.
it was like a
Okay.
LAN. Yeah, so if you look on HTV, they had like a
Hmm.
few LANs like over the years.
Awesome. Okay.
Um,
And
and it
who
was
did you
like
go with?
I was at Kaz Esports, so it was like
Oh, right.
players
Cool.
from like my old team. So it was like
Sure.
JChem was one of them.
Yeah.
Dream, Roma, and MCK. So I think
Okay. All right.
they're sort of more like older UKCS players now, I guess.
Fair. Okay.
If you haven't, yeah. So that was sort of the lineup, and there was like other teams there like Endpoint. Endpoint also went. It was like a battle of
Sick.
the nations. So it was like 3 UK teams, 3 Russian teams, and 3 Chinese teams, and
That's
that
really
was sort
cool.
of the yeah. It was a very interesting experience.
Yeah, for sure. So right now, if you could make your dream Valorant roster, what would it be? And it can you can do one that includes you and one that doesn't. Your dream five, who you making?
All right, let me have a look at that. I need to think. I need to
Go
think
on.
for a second.
Yeah,
Okay.
this one's a tough one.
All right. So first, I'm gonna have artists.
Okay. And oh yeah,
'Cause
and why as well. So you got to give me a breakdown
yeah,
on kind of why you're picking them.
yeah. Artist is just funny and he's really good. So
For sure. Nice and easy.
yeah, and also you can play like loads of agents as well. So
For
he's
sure.
really good to have in your team. Um, let me think. I'll have probably Durkee as well because he's insane.
Yeah, he's nuts.
Uh, yeah, and then ooh, let me think. It's really hard, isn't it?
It's tough to like really isolate five because
Yeah,
especially because of how competitive it is now.
yeah. I'd say Nats is a good player. He's like a good
Yeah.
sentinel player to
Okay.
have. And then probably Leo. Wait, is that 4 players or 5? Yeah,
That's
including
four.
me.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Oh,
no, it's
and
5
include
if you
you.
include me.
Yeah.
Yeah, okay.
Easy. Okay.
Okay. And
Dream
then if you
team.
remove me, add an angel. There we go.
Okay.
That's an easy one.
There we go. Nice. And for you, who do you think, I think this is a very kind of contested a lot at the moment, but who do you think is the best team in the world right now? And obviously a lot of people lean in favor of FPX, but
Yeah.
kind of who would you say is the best team in your opinion?
Yeah, I mean, I think recency bias obviously leans towards
Yeah.
FPX. I think honestly, like if you give PaperX like a couple more lands, like I'm interested to see how they can do at Champions. But
Yeah.
if we, because they've sort of been consistently over the last few lands, like doing really well.
Yeah, I agree.
So I think leading into Champions is actually really good for them. I've also seen like this team as well, like EDG. I think
Oh,
like
Edward
they've been
Gaming.
coming from
Yeah,
China.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah, like they look really good. Honestly, like they beat like the Korean teams who are actually like pretty good, like
Yeah.
really easily, like on players.
And do
And
you know
then
what's
like other
crazy
teams.
as well? Like, Valorant's not even released in China,
Yeah,
which is
yeah,
just nuts. So, I mean, I think that's going to be a real untapped market. If this one team, Edward Gaming, are doing so well and
yeah,
they're destroying all the Korean teams,
yeah,
and it's not even released in their country yet. So, I don't know.
yeah.
I think that could be definitely a region for the future.
Yeah, exactly. Like I think that their playstyle is kind of similar to Paper X, where they're sort of very aggressive, and I
Yeah,
think that we saw that in CS with like Ty Lue, and they sort of struggled
sure.
because CS is always like more of a game where I think that the fundamentals are probably more like favored than
Hmm.
like individual skill.
For sure.
So I think they struggled in that way. But I think in a game like Valorant, I think where there's a lot of abilities and like ults can sway rounds, and I think that like obviously Paper X have showed that it can do like work really well. So I think they've like from what I've seen how they play, I think it could disrupt like how a lot of EU teams play because like
For sure.
if you see Paper X, they like literally counter like how EU teams play in general.
Yeah,
Like
yeah.
I remember like them against G2 for example, like
Yeah,
they just really like disrupt like all your plans and stuff. So I think
for
that
sure.
those sort of teams can be like really scary, and I think they can be really good.
Love it. And you kind of sort of touched on it there, but that was actually the next question as well. You've obviously played both CS and Valorant at a pretty high level, right? What are your kind of thoughts on the comparisons between the two, and sort of how the two are doing as esports, being both kind of part of both?
Yeah, I mean I think that CS obviously has always been a bit bigger for
Mhm.
now, and I think obviously it's an older game. It's had more time to develop.
Yeah, for sure.
I think
10th birthday actually yesterday, so I mean,
yeah.
literally, it's been such a long time. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, CS, like if you watch the finals of the two tournaments, CS versus Valorant, it can't really compare right now.
Hmm.
But I think that if you give it like 5 or so years, let the sort of China, I think China's going to be a big one to help the game
Agreed.
develop. You know, it's free to play. It's going to be free to play there, obviously, like
Hmm.
it is everywhere else. But I
Yeah.
think free to play games in Asia, especially, are
They're
very
harder to find, right? Yeah.
like they're sort of like what you need. Like if you look at League in like China and Korea, like they're really big. So I think that you need the game to be free to play, and I think that's what CS lacked for a long time. Because I think
Agreed.
CS also wasn't released in China, and it
Hmm.
also wasn't free. So I think that's what it sort of needed to get CS big. And I think CS like China and like CS and China is really big now. I think as well. So
Hmm.
it's got like a lot of the player base there. So I think that in terms of like give it a few years, let the franchise in sort of do its thing, and I think that's going to be sort of a very stable model going forward. And I'm hoping with the franchise, and we get to see more like third-party tournaments every year. I think they should
Yeah,
sort
agreed.
of leave that period after champions, like towards the end of the year, like to be more for like
Hmm.
third-party tournament because that will sort of allow them to be like open format, open
For sure.
qualifiers, etc. I think that would sort of be like a comparison from the League of Legends side of things, which you don't have anything like that. That would sort of be like more of a yeah, something fresh and new.
Yeah.
So I think the franchise is a good idea, but it does sort of it's a bit more gatekeepy, isn't it, in general? So I
At times,
think
yeah.
that it's
I think that's
yeah,
what we're hoping that it doesn't happen, right? I mean,
yeah,
I think League's a good example because the sort of the tier two of League is struggling at times. What I know, and even when they do their tier two League tournaments, I think I'm right in saying the viewership isn't amazing because everyone just kind of waits for the big franchise team. So I think that's the hope that this is slightly different to that,
yeah. I mean, I think Tier 2 League does good because of like pretty much the orgs like
for sure.
K Corp and Koi.
Hmm.
I think without those orgs, who probably should be in LEC, like those orgs should be in LEC.
Hmm.
Like without those orgs, I think that it would struggle.
Hmm.
I think it's more just about like for the players as well. Like an orcs, it's just not this. It's just not the same to never have the chance to compete at the top level. Like
Yeah,
you pretty much always have to get poached, and I think that League has like the bias for like younger players in general. Like if
yeah,
you look at
agreed.
like who gets picked up, so I think that once you hit a certain age in League, it's like really hard to become like a
GG.
tier one player if you haven't already reached it. So I think hopefully with like open format and stuff and like the way Valorant is, that would sort of not be the case.
Hmm.
I think this likely to be like that, especially with like the roles required and stuff like that. It's very different to League, so hopefully it
For
will
sure.
be sort of more variety for that. But yeah, hopefully Tier 2 soon will do well.
For sure. And for you as well, have you ever been sort of tempted to play any of the MOBA games like League, like Dota? Have you ever have you even played them? Any interest in those?
Yeah, I play a fair bit of League in my
Hmm.
spare time.
Ever
I
tempted to make it like or try and go down the kind of the road to pro in League, or was it just never for you?
no, honestly, I think that one the game's been out too long, and honestly, like the other
Mhm.
thing is like I only started playing MOBAs like a couple of years ago, so
Right,
I'm not quite at that level.
late to the ship kind of thing as well. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, so I mean, probably not. No.
Fair enough, fair enough. So this is an interesting one from Reddit as well. It was so someone was asking, how do you feel about the future of UK FPS games, being of course both CS and VAL, because they sort of have mixed reviews. I think if you look towards CS, a lot of people don't really care about the UK CS too much, or don't really
Yeah,
think about it. Apart from like Endpoint being one of the biggest UK orgs, Fnatic is a UK org, but don't really have a UK team.
yeah,
And then obviously Valorant was like a really kind of fresh opportunity. You had the players who were maybe struggling in CS. Like I think Boat is a great example, right? Couldn't really make it to the tier one pro level in CS, but has kind of had this fresh opportunity to really show how good he actually is within Valorant. So what do you think about kind of the future of UK FPS games?
Yeah, so I mean, I think that obviously, like compared to like Scandinavian culture, I think that esports in general is always gonna have a harder time than it would. It's not necessarily as ingrained in the culture as it is
Yeah, agreed.
for other regions. But I think stuff like FIFA esports and stuff like that sort of made it more mainstream,
Hmm.
and sort of it is becoming more of a more sort of recognized. I think that like obviously when I tell people like what I do and stuff, like people actually have heard of it now
That's
compared
good.
to in the
Yeah,
past
yeah.
where like no
They had
one
no
had.
idea. Hmm.
So I think that in general, like the fact that the fact that the UK players like did really have done like pretty good in Valorant, that's like a good. It's good for UK esports, and I think UK
Exactly.
esports does pretty decent overall, like outside of FPS games as well. And I think even maybe there's good players in like Rainbow Six as well. I don't know. I don't really follow it, but I think
Yeah,
in
not
general it
not
does
too.
good, but not necessarily like in UK like
Mhm.
CS/Val. But even in UK CS, like we saw Smuya, we saw
Of course, yeah.
Mezzi, for example,
Yeah, yeah,
Alex.
great
Like
example.
there's definitely some success, but um I think that the Val scene's like going to be really good for UK because it's going to be a lot of IGLs, a lot of upcoming
I agree.
players.
Yeah.
So I think that it's sort of steadily like sort of developing.
Hmm.
I think the thing with Val is that like you'll never really see like an all five UK team
Yeah,
because it's more like international teams
for
and
sure.
sort of mixed nationalities. So I think that that's unlikely to happen. But I think we'll always see like UK players do really good here and there. I'd actually like to see like a Nations Cup or something like that.
Yeah, that'd be sick.
That'd be really cool.
I mean, that's like a really good idea for the third party tournament as well. Have a little kind of a nations kind of rivalry thing. It's sort of like show matches, basically.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I think that would be a really good idea.
So for you, if you could sort of make any changes to kind of the UK scene as a whole, I mean, a lot of people talk about the UK scene's attitude. I think a lot of people, especially in CS, we're kind of known as being toxic, for example. And of course, you were kind of part of that CSC. You probably saw it at some way, just how the CS in the UK is known as toxic. But like kind of for CS and Valorant, if there's any changes you can make or things that you'd like to see the scene generally change to, I guess, improve, what would it be?
I mean, I think a lot of like the way that people work in general, like, it's a lot of it's ingrained in the culture.
Mm-hmm.
I think that like the way that like stuff has gone is always like kind of ingrained in the culture. And I
Yeah.
think that the way UK people are in general, there's always going to be something like that.
Okay, for sure.
But I think that I think it was the lack of investment. And
Okay.
also the fact that a lot of like when I was starting playing, like a lot of the players who you looked up at, a lot of them quit
Hmm.
before CS got big, like CS:GO.
Yeah.
So we sort of lost the sort of older players who
Right.
could have sort of taught everyone how to play. So that was sort of the main reason that I think that the period of time that I was playing, there was sort of no like direction really, and there was sort of a lot of like there was sort of a lack of IGLs, etc., and like more experienced players.
Makes
Um,
sense.
yeah, that was sort of the main thing really. But I think a lot of it, honestly, like how UK people, it's like kind of in the culture, and I think it's sort of down to the individual to realize
Yeah.
like because I mean I get it in ranked games as well. Like you get the UK person in your team, and it's just like half the
Oh,
time that it's
yeah.
just like they're like crying or they're like telling you how to play, and it's
Yeah.
just like I don't know. I think it's just like
Just
a
love.
cultural thing, honestly.
For sure. For sure. And I guess another side of thing is that you're an ex-player of Northern Europe. What is kind of the biggest missing links for teams in that region? Kind of what do you think needs specifically for Northern Europe to kind of once again, we kind of touched a little bit on this earlier, but to once again become that region that everyone sort of looks up to. And I think in Split One, most people kind of thought we'd be the best of the best.
Yeah, I mean I think that if on paper we were, but
Hmm.
like I think it's just about obviously when the way this format works, only one team gets to go through.
Of course.
So it's sort of a bit of a I wouldn't say lottery, but it's obviously like you've got to sort of bank on the fact that that team performs, and both
Yeah.
times like Excel hasn't performed. Obviously, I was part of that one of the times,
For
so
sure. For sure.
I don't think that necessarily like speaks badly about the region. I think it's just like in this situation because obviously we've got a lot of talent. Like it's just in this sort of scenarios like
Hmm.
they didn't do well. So I think that if we have another team, whether it's Excel or someone else, I think that they'll definitely do good regardless to it because and especially like I was speaking about before the residency rule if that sort of is enforced more, I think that a lot of the Northern European talent will come back and it will
For
be
sure.
sort of very competitive again. So it's just sort of whether they sort of perform on the VRL final stage really.
Yeah, love to see it. Well, second to last question is, what do you think is the biggest issues that separates tier 2 teams from tier 1 teams?
I honestly I'd say it's like experience for the most part.
Okay.
I think that the fundamentals for a lot of these tier 2 teams aren't really there. and obviously that comes with time. So I think that it's mostly experience, and I think a lot of teams as well, like in tier 2, don't necessarily have like the best coaching staff or like support
Right,
overall.
for
Like
sure.
you look at a lot of these tier 1 teams, they're like head coach, assistant coach, analyst, like, and
Yeah,
some
like
teams only
mental
have like
coach and everything, got
yeah,
everything. Yeah, yeah.
yeah, exactly. And I think that a lot of tier 2 teams don't have that support, and then because the orgs necessarily like can't
Afford
really
it. Yeah, yeah.
support. Yeah, which is fair, you know. That's always
Exactly. Yeah.
and that's always going to be the sort of difference between tier 2 and tier 1. The fact that the tier 1 teams can like buy players out for expensive amounts and sort of build the teams they want as well. Whereas
Sure.
like tier 2 sort of just either have to pick up like a new talent, or they'll have to pick up like free agent players, or they'll have to pay like a smaller buyout for maybe like a more experienced player or whatever. Like that's sort of like the only ways you can really like build teams. Whereas like the tier 1 orgs pretty much just get a pick of like what players they want.
For
So
sure. For sure.
yeah.
And our final question: what changes would you make to Valorant as a whole now, and why? If it was you who were making all the decisions, what would you change? Whether it be, I mean, it could be like the game itself, an agent, buff or nerf someone. Could even be something to do with the tournaments or the qualification. What would you do?
I think I'd like to see less ults and halves in general, like
Okay.
increase of. So I think that for spectators, especially, like I think it can be sort of hard to follow. I think huge respect to like anyone who does like observing in this
Oh,
game, because
it's
it's
insanely hard,
must
isn't
be
it?
insanely
Yeah.
hard. Like I think that sometimes like the criticism of, like CS people who watch like Valorant is that it's very hard to follow.
Hmm.
It's a lot of stuff going on at once. So I think that you could sort of I do like how the ults work, but I think if you look like purely spectator base, it's definitely like harder to follow, like with
Yeah.
all the ults going on, and some of the rounds are just like complete chaos, and it's like you got it must be like impossible to like understand as like a newcomer. That's why I think that's why CS is so good, because it is sort of very simple
Yeah, it's very
to
standard,
watch.
right? You know, flash, molly, nade, smoke, and then kind
Yeah,
of just like pure guns, rather than yeah. I think that's definitely the thing that I've noticed from a lot of CS guys who try and get into Valorant or try and watch
yeah,
Valorant is that they just have no idea what's going on, because it's
yeah.
it's very hectic at times. So that's
Yeah,
fair
I
enough.
mean that's part of the skill as well. To be fair, so
Exactly.
you do like remove like a part of the skill when you want to more simplify it. But I think that I'm not sure necessarily. Like, I think as time goes on, it will be like not really an issue. Because I mean, if you look at like League of Legends team fights as well, like they're
Mm,
super complex as well, and there's a lot
for
going
sure.
on. And obviously that esports still does really well. So I
Exactly.
think that
Exactly.
it's kind of inconsequential in the end, but I think it would like make it easier for like people to get into the esport.
Yeah, for sure, for sure. Well, that concludes everything. So I'll say thanks, and of course I'll give you an opportunity if you want to kind of do any shout outs. I mean, this is your time to do it. Of course, your ads on screen, so of course go and
Yeah,
follow Ozzy
is it
on
up here?
Twitter.
Is it here?
It's below you, right below
Follow me.
you,
Okay,
right below.
yeah,
So
just
yeah,
follow me. All I have to say is follow me. That's it.
easy stuff. Well, mate, thank you very much for joining me. It's been an absolute pleasure. It's been good to kind of really get your insight as well, especially kind of as you both touched on CS and Valorant, so it's sort of
Yeah.
perfect. But mate, thank you very much for joining me. It's been a pleasure.
Cheers. Thanks for having me on.
And cheers everyone for watching. Enjoy, subscribe, all the good stuff. Go check out Ozzy on Twitter. It's right below. This way? Yeah, this way. There we go. Go check it out. Thank you for joining me, and I'll see you all soon. Peace out.